Okay. Disintermediation. It's a $100 word there, disintermediation. But it occurs, or it describes a situation where producers can kind of sidestep or go around intermediaries and go directly to final buyers, or when a radically new type of channel intermediary displaces traditional ones. So when the internet came, there was all this discussion about disintermediation, that people could go directly to customers and go around intermediaries, and lots of that happened. Lots of it didn't work. Lots of it because these intermediaries did what? They added some sort of value, and just going directly to the customer with your product or service because you can doesn't mean that's the best thing to do. Here's an example of a flower company that sells flowers directly to consumers over the internet. And this was a success with this company, but companies like this selling flowers directly to individuals. Now, this assumes you know what you want. If you don't and you really want to speak to someone and you want to smell the flowers and that sort of thing, there's still a market for that. Okay? And in fact, you probably will have to pay a substantial amount more for that added value. But disintermediation did occur in, for example, the flower business. This is an example where Black & Decker chose not to create a channel conflict and not to disintermediate. And so they have websites, and Black & Decker is just an example, but they sell their, let's say they market their products and services, but they don't actually sell them. So they can get you all excited about their products and services, give you information that you need, but then ultimately they direct you to the local stores that carry the product. And it could be that the local stores actually pay a joint fee and a marketing fee to help support this activity, because this is something that the company is doing on their behalf as well. Okay. Outsourcing distribution. There are many ways, again, to distribute. That's what we're talking about here. And remember, in the discussion on business model and delivery model, we talked about, you can have your own sales force, or you could use an manufacturer's rep or outsource your sales. And this is a decision that you do actually have to make. A company sales force, again, is employed by you, your firm. Okay. While a manufacturing agency or a manufacturing rep, you outsource your sales. It's an independent sales organization that sells products for other companies at the same time. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages for this. For example, if you're a new company, you might want to use a manufacturer's agent, because they may be able to get your products and services placed in places that you don't have the clout to do so yet. But at the same time, you need to give them a reason to push your product versus the competing product. So that might mean higher margins, lower prices, that sort of thing. And be aware, not all of these agencies are reputable. There's sometimes where you have to, that they may ask for bribes and other sort of kickbacks. So just be aware that sometimes that's how the game is played. Now, with a company sales force, of course, that's going to be more costly to you. But again, we talked about the importance of establishing a good relationship with your customers. And if you have your own salespeople, you can begin to establish this relationship. With the manufacturer's rep, you don't have a relationship with the customer. It's the manufacturing rep that has the relationship with the customer. So you need to be very careful when you think about selling through a manufacturer's rep like that. So keep that in mind. So here are a couple of distribution strategy alternatives. How many intermediaries? Now you can have, you can choose how many, of course, intermediaries you want to use. So in first one, intensive distribution. Basically, anybody who can stock, you want them to stock your product and service. Get it out in as many outlets as possible. On the other hand, there's an exclusive distribution arrangement where you sell limited kind of quote unquote licenses to a few outlets that have kind of the exclusive right to sell your product. Now, the advantage of that, of course, is that you have these outlets that will spend more time with your product or service because they have kind of a right to sell it where other retailers that they might be competing with or number outlets that they might be competing with do not. But of course, you're not in 10,000 outlets. Maybe you're in 100, and so as a result, you have to balance. Is it better for us to have 100 people really focused on it, or 1,000 people who aren't? And then there's selective distribution, which again is somewhere in between. It's not just everybody who wants it can sell it, but you have to meet some sort of criteria. And probably this selective distribution is really a good one to think about, because you don't necessarily want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to sell your product, especially when they're not going to put any emphasis on it, especially when they're going to put it in the back of the shelf and not pay it any attention. So you'd rather have some sort of way in which you can differentiate between good outlets and bad outlets, and try to get it in as many quote-unquote good outlets as you can. So here's an example of a selective distribution. Maytag, they make white goods, and they use a selective distribution for their white goods. And so here on their website, where to buy. Again, these are where to find the stores carrying the Maytag brand. Again, they might have some joint marketing relationship with them as in addition. International channel decisions. This is really interesting and really important because we're in a global environment, and I'm assuming that the businesses that you start are going to be global at some time as well. Whether or not from the start, they're soon going to be global. And distribution varies tremendously across country. Japan is notorious to have a very complex multi-layered distribution system, and it's hard for Western firms to understand it, let alone penetrate it. It's a way in which they can allow their domestic brands to grow, and they have a large market, and that works for them very well. India and China, again, they have a very huge countries, large populations. They have a very, as we would see it, inefficient distribution system. It works for them in many respects, but still, it's wild and crazy if you ever take a look at it. And related to infrastructure and related to transportation and communications and those sorts of things. But I think that they're changing as well, both China and India, and also developing countries, and are trying to incorporate some of the lessons learned and some of the failures of the distribution system set up in the West. In fact, some of them are skipping some of the steps that we have taken and going directly to a more efficient system than even the people in the so-called advanced West have. Public policy and distribution. Tying agreements are illegal. Agreements where you have a special contract that you, for example, if Xerox required every business who brought or leased their copier to also buy their brand of paper, that would be illegal. That would be illegal. Companies kind of skirt the law in many respects with this, but you need to be aware of this, not only from the purchasing standpoint, from you being the company or the startup. You need to be aware of it as well. Territorial agreements related to franchising. We've, again, talked about that before. Exclusive distribution and dealings upstream and downstream. This, again, that you have to buy the product from the wholesaler, or you have to sell the product to the retailer. You got to be careful with these have to sort of contracts. They can get you into trouble. Marketing logistics. Again, the physical flow of goods and services and related information from points of origin to points of consumption. And it can be inbound distribution in terms of your supply of goods and services to you, or it could be outbound, the logistics related to getting your product and service out to your customers, and reverse distribution, products and services that have to come back to you. And in each one of these, there are places where innovation can occur. In this channel management discussion, you need to talk about inventory management, and there's always this balance between how much inventory should you have. You don't want to have too much, but you don't want to have too little. If you have too much, you have too much money tied up in inventory that's not doing anything. There's also a risk of theft and fire and other sorts of problematic things with inventory. At the same time, if you have too little and you run out, that might affect your ability to service your customers in a good sort of way. So you want to have some sort of buffer against shortage, and that has to be balanced against the cost of ordering and setting up. And for those quants out there, there is queuing theory and there is inventory management theory, where you can actually figure out what's the good balance for your inventory. Just-in-time inventory systems, again, where it's timed, so you actually don't hold very much inventory at all, is that pretty much when the customer buys, that's when the product is coming in the door and it goes right through. It's kind of a pass-through system. RFID technology, smart technology. Well, this is a way to manage inventory. Some companies, such as Walmart, are making it mandatory that certain products carry RFID tags, and RFID tags were a way to really manage the inventory. And these radio frequency identification devices are passive, but also can be active as well. And if you're interested in that, you should do some additional reading on RFID technology. This obviously is from a company, a group pushing RFID technology. 100% return on investment in a month available today, 38% labor reduction, blah, 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 blah. A lot of that stuff is true, but you need to be careful because it's not perfect and it doesn't work in every situation. Transportation obviously is key in terms of distribution of your products and services, and the ways you can distribute, truck and railroad and ship and pipeline and air and internet and intermodal transportation. We'll talk about what that is in a second. So you think when you're distributing your product that there's a wide range, and there are a number of ways you can get your product and service to your customer. Intermodal has been big since a couple of major innovations related to trucking and shipping. But intermodal transportation is, again, when you combine 2 or 3 modes of transportation, and also now that they have containers that which revolutionized distribution, that fit on a truck, fit on a ship, fit on a boat, fit on a plane. The fishy back, piggy back, train ship, airship, all of these intermodal designs make distributing your product much more efficient than it was just a few years ago. Third-party logistics. Many small, medium-sized enterprises, again, outsource their logistics to UPS and Federal Express and DHL and all of these sorts of companies, which have grown tremendously because of this. And I would say you need to look at this closely, because this is a way that you can get world-class distribution, world-class logistics, without having to invest in it yourself. In fact, you wouldn't be able to come close to what these guys can do if you're a small, medium-sized enterprise or even a large organization. So really look into third-party logistics depending upon the product or service that you are trying to sell. So what do we touch base on today? We touched base on the importance and functions of channels of distribution. We talked about channel conflict. We talked about marketing systems, both horizontal and vertical. We talked about, in a limited sort of way, some channel innovation. We talked about distribution strategy. We talked about the importance of inventory management and the different types of transportation you can use when distributing your product. So I hope you keep these things in mind when you're thinking about your marketing in a broad sense. Thank you.